Hi, everyone. Let's talk today about what to do in order to fix your dog behavior issues before you actually start fixing those issues. Basically, what to do before you hire a trainer, before you Google some solutions on the internet, you talk to some pet professionals. There is actually something you should do before all that in order to start fixing your dog behavior issues. And by behavior issues, it can be anything hyperactivity, reactivity, and stuff like that. The way how it usually works when somebody comes to the trainer or a behavior consultant, somebody like me, when people come to me and say, like, hey, my dog is barking at other dogs or my dog is acting aggressively with guests and stuff like this. And people expect me to give them some training solutions, sometimes people expect to get some quick fixes, or sometimes people just want to know what to do in order to stop the dog doing that. But the problem is, before we start talking about training solutions, management solutions, and other things, we need to closely look at your dog's well being. And by well being, I mean, what is your dog needs in terms of physical activities, in terms of mental stimulation, in terms of, I don't know, spending time with you, spending time with other dogs, and all sorts of other things that include the dog's well being. But imagine, let's say you come to the trainer and you tell them, hey, my dog is aggressive to my, I don't know, boyfriend. How do I fix that? How do I get them friendly with each other? And me as a trainer tell you, first, let's fix your dog well-being. Of course, most often than not, people will be like, that's bullshit. That's those positive trainers. They just don't know what to do. That's why they always talk about things that are not important. Basically, you want a solution and somebody talks about something that's like too broad. But the problem, we need to talk about those broad things, that some of the issues the dog has are actually happening because some of the dog's needs are not met. What do I mean by that? Let's say you have a enormous backyard, so you don't really take your dog for walks because you feel like, oh, we have a backyard, I have somewhere to walk. You have a very hyperactive dog and your dog is like, doesn't listen to you, is all over the place, and you think like, what do I do to calm my dog down? But the problem is, first we have to exert your dog, first we have to fulfill their needs before we work on other things. Or for example, if there is an issue, the dog is constantly hovering on the street, picking garbage on the street and stuff like this, we have to address the wellness first. For example, so let's say if you're my client, I would ask you like, how often you feed your dog? And you say like, oh, my dog is eating like once a day or twice a day. So the first solution will be, maybe your dog has the type of metabolism that the dog is constantly hungry. Maybe we need to break up their meals into 2, 3, 4, sometimes even 5 times a day if it's a smaller dog. We also have to look like what your dog eats. Maybe we need to add some variety to their diet. Maybe we need to even talk to a veterinary nutritionist and see maybe they're lacking certain elements in their diet. That's why they're looking outside and, looking for ways to fulfill those needs. Sometimes it's a mental boredom. The dog is like so bored, they require a lot of mental stimulation. They need a lot of stuff to be done with them, but they don't get enough. Doesn't mean that you don't do anything. It just that particular dog needs more. So in this case, sometimes like looking for garbage on the street can be just a way for the dog to, entertain themselves. So we have to see, okay, how the routine looks like, how many walks per day the dog gets, how much mental stimulation the dog gets. And often people look at walks as something physical. So like I take my dog for a walk or I take my dog to play fetch. That's how their physical needs are met. There is no other needs outside of that. And I give them food and water and they're fine. But dogs have also mental needs. So when we take a dog for a walk, let's say we always take a same route. We go to the same place. We do the same thing every day. There is nothing new happens in the dog's life. For some dogs, it's fine. Some dogs, the same like humans, they're more timid, more fearful. They would actually prefer to go to familiar places. But some dogs, they need to explore. They need to go in new places. They need you to take them hiking. They need you to maybe go to the different neighborhoods and stuff like that. So depends on those needs. You might have issues because if the dog is not fulfilled mentally or physically, then unfortunately some like other things in their behavior might become an issue. But at the same time, in other situations, if the dog is very hyper energetic, it doesn't always mean we need to increase the activity. So, because people always think like, oh, I need to tire my dog out. Not necessary. But in this case again, we have to look at the dog's wellness. We have to say like, okay, how many walks per day you have? And then the person says, yeah, I walk my dog twice a day, like 45 minutes. In my experience, people usually overestimate how much they actually walk the dog. So if you think in your head, like, yeah, I usually have 2 walks per day, 45 minutes each, in reality, it is probably like 30 minutes for a walk. If you don't believe me, put a timer for 45 minutes, go for a walk, do it every day for like a week, and just notice how often you will be like, oh, it's time to go home. And then you look at the watch and it's only 30 minutes. So, first of all, we establish how many actual, it's not about me shaming you or somebody else shaming themselves, like, oh, I'm not good enough because I was thinking I'm walking for 45 minutes, but I'm not only doing 30. No, it's just realistically understanding how many hours, like of walk my dog gets per day. Then we look at the age of the dog. Of course, the senior dog versus the dog who is like 1 or 2 years old, they have different needs. Let's say we have a 2-year-old dog who is like fairly active, and we take them like for half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening. This is definitely not enough for the hyperactive dog. So we need to probably have like 1 hour walk in the morning, 1 hour walk in the evening. Let's say you take, like, let's say your schedule allows you to have like a 1 45-minute walk in the morning, and then you finish your walk midday and you take your dog for like 2 hour like hike or something like this. Let's say you are a fairly active person. In this case, we can assume that the dog probably gets enough physical exercise. I mean, if we work with you, we'll probably have to look at the breed and other like more personality of a dog. But we can assume that, okay, like if the dog gets like on an everyday basis such a amount of exercise, their needs probably met. But then we start looking at other things. Maybe they need mental stimulation. That's why they're so hyperactive at home. Maybe they actually don't need mental stimulation because you also do the training. You also maybe do some enrichment for your dog. You do some exercises. You buy them food puzzles. You buy them like toy puzzles and stuff like this. So in this case, we are actually talking about the fact that dog is probably like definitely meeting all their physical and mental needs, but maybe just in general, the dog doesn't know how to calm down and relax. So then we start looking, okay, what's with the sleeping routine? The question is like, okay, how many hours per day your dog sleeps? Like normally dogs, like adult dogs, they should sleep like, let's say 14, 12 hours per day. So if they sleep 8 hours at night, they still have to have some deep sleep, not just laying down, but actually sleeping during the day. And I have some clients who have dogs with behavior issues. They would tell me like, oh, my dog doesn't sleep during the day. They may lay down, but I never saw them fully deeply asleep. And by deeply asleep, that means the dog is on their side. They usually stretched out. They completely like passed out. They don't even notice what you're doing. So in this case, we have to work on that. And sometimes what happens, for example, the client works from home. Besides having like longer walks and lots of training, lots of enrichment activities for the dog, what also happens, the dog doesn't have their own dog bed. So the dog just follows the person from room to room, wherever they're working. And usually when the person gets up of the couch, the dog notices that, and they also get up from the couch. The person goes, let's say, to the kitchen to, I don't know, get some water, and the dog, is there as well. And the person, let me give you a treat. Let me give you something. So the dog is always on standby, and there is no way the dog will be deeply asleep because they're always on standby. So in this case, we have to talk about, in terms of dogs' wellness, they need to have a quiet time. So they need a dog bed, their own personal space on the couch, but they're not following you from room to room. And if the dog is sleeping on the couch, we're not bugging them. We're not, so that's what also happens sometimes. The dog space is, somewhere where people walk by. So there is no way for the dog to actually fall asleep deeply because people are constantly passing by, or a person is constantly petting the dog. Every time I pass by, especially if there are like several people living in a house, I had a case like that. So every time people would pass by, somebody would pet the dog, wake up the dog. And again, I'm not saying don't touch your dog or something like this, but you have to understand, if you're dealing with certain issues, your dog is hyperactive, they're like hyper attached to you, which is not necessarily a bad thing, and then you have some other issues, and then you realize like, oh, my dog is not sleeping. But then you also have to realize like, yeah, of course my dog is not sleeping, because every time they're asleep, like I wake them up. So that's another thing. Okay, so this is a glimpse on how we look at the wellness. You can research more at this topic. You can look at such things as 5 freedoms or 5 domains, and I will link some of the information below for you just to understand what it is. And also in my next video, I will actually talk about this topic. So before we go and fix some behavior issues, we have to make sure that the dog's well-being, all the potential gaps are closed, that all the needs are met, and everything is in order. Again, check my next video for more details about that.